Where do I even begin? The Gringo Papi is the second, for lack of a better word, special, released by man who refuses to stop calling himself a comedian, Brawdin Scoobs. And it is one of the worst things I've ever seen. When I heard about this special months ago, I expected it to be bad. But when I first watched this comedy set, which is what I'm going to call it because it isn't a special, I was genuinely stunned. I didn't understand how it was possible for him to get any worse at comedy. But somehow he did. The best way to describe the special would be to say that about half of it comprises material that would have been turned down by George Lopez or Carlos Mencia. It's the most generic, watered-down Mexican jokes you've ever heard. At one point, Scoobs just lists off some Mexican food his wife cooked. On another occasion, he complains that his wife's bean-heavy cuisine makes him tell jokes in his pants. See, that's funny because Scoobs' jokes are shit. Examining things a little more deeply, there is a strange divide in this set. The first quarter or so is Scoobs' COVID material, which honestly feels really weird and out of place here. I don't know exactly when this special was recorded, but if I had to guess, I'd say early 2021 feels about right. Unless, of course, his material was just that outdated, which is entirely possible. Scoobs opens up with a little crowd work, and some commentary on donut shops offering free donuts to people who get vaccinated. But it's so boring and irrelevant that it isn't even worth talking about. Where things start getting weird is when Scoobs begins talking about the first person to get the Johnson vaccine. Here is a direct quote. "Do remember the first dumbass that messed it all up for everybody, scared the shit out from getting vaccinated? Remember that idiot?" Scoobs says this guy was clearly a meth addict and nobody looked into his background before putting him on all the major news outlets for getting the John Africa vaccine. The punchline to this bit is Scoobs doing an impression of this guy and saying, "I can't stop sweating, bro. I feel like I'm growing wings." I guess he mistook the Don Johnson vaccine for Red Bull or something. Scoobs uses his bizarre reference to segue into what is one of the few segments that could be considered a legitimate joke. He starts off by saying that the vaccine is about marketing, and what the drug companies need to do is hire a dime-piece actor we've never heard of to go on the news and say that the only side effect he's had from the vaccine was that his goddamn dick is down to his ankle. Again, this is one of a handful of moments from the set that actually feels like a joke. There is a segue, the premise is coherent and relatively concise, there is a decent setup and a passable punchline, even if he does mangle it with Schwabanese. But it's the exception. Most of this set is a melange of ideas flying out of Scoobs' mouth like drunken outlaws getting defenestrated in a Western movie. So, when he manages to have a joke that actually feels like a proper joke, it stands out. That being said, it's possibly the most basic and unoriginal joke anyone could write about the vaccine. They should have had a celebrity say the vaccine made his dick bigger is the first joke people were making on the day of the rollout, and it's Scoobs' best joke about the subject. Following this bit, Brawdin starts talking about how good it is to be in Dallas. No segue, and there's a cut so bad that around 3:54, you can actually hear the audio hard drop out during a B-roll shot of the audience, and when it comes back to Scoobs, he is mid-inhale. I don't know what was so bad that it necessitated that kind of cut, but it speaks to a larger problem with Gringo Papi that I'll get to later. Scoobs does get a cheap pop from the audience by talking about how Texas shows him so much love, before switching up to talking about LA and their lockdowns. In a rare moment of clarity while complaining about his wife nagging him, Scoobs says his life would be so much easier if he was gay as shit. Then he muses about how much better it would be to be locked down with the homies, playing video games, working out, and fucking! Scoobs uses this as a bridge to begin talking about being locked down with his wife for a full year, and finding out that he was married to a goddamn rattlesnake. This is a minor thing, and I'm sure somebody will accuse me of nitpicking a comedy special, but I find it weird that Scoobs has to repeatedly say that he was locked down for an entire year with the family. That's demonstrably false. The guy has like 9 fucking podcasts. He's on video all the time. He probably spent more time during the pandemic in the studio or in his drug than at his house. It's just such an inexplicable habit that Scoobs needs to lie about things that we have hundreds of hours of video evidence disproving. But I digest. The lockdown bit does lead to what is probably the best joke of the set. Brendan starts rambling about his son going back to school for the first time since the lockdown started and says he took a group picture of his son and his son's friends. He texts the picture to his wife, who then tells him to crop out the uglies and resend, apparently not realizing they were in a group text with other parents. The joke is far and away the best joke from Gringo Papi and probably the best joke Schaub has ever come up with on his own. Unfortunately, the set falls off a cliff after this joke. This is where Schaub transitions into his Mexican material. He starts off by letting us know that his wife isn't Taco Bell Mexican, she's from Guadalajara and came to the States illegally 10 years ago, which is 100% false. Again, I don't know why Schaub felt the need to lie about something that is demonstrably untrue, but it reminds me of the way he had to lie about Dr. Shu, the giant Asian doctor, and give him a stereotypical Asian accent. At any rate, Schaub says that when he started dating his wife, she was making him authentic Mexican dishes every night, like huevos rancheros and pico de gallo, which I'm pretty sure is just salsa. The joke here is that Schaub says the names of these foods very redactedly. The next 9 minutes of this special are so inconsequential and boring that I really don't have anything to say about them. He mispronounces things, makes some wacky faces, and does physical comedy, but this is straight up filler. Schaub rambles about his Mexican in-laws and trying to go on a diet but getting fat because he eats too much Mexican food. He's also the only member of his family that doesn't speak Spanish, among many other boring bits that aren't worth mentioning in detail. The only joke that stands out is when Brendan makes fun of his Mexican mother-in-law for misunderstanding keto diet as taquito diet. It's only noteworthy because of the fact that Schaub has the gall to make fun of anyone else's grasp on the English language. That brings us to what is essentially Brendan's closing bit. Yes, his closing bit is 18 minutes in because this set is less than 25 minutes long. The basic premise of Schaub's closing bit is that during the lockdown he moved into a new house and was awoken in the middle of the night by a mountain lion cry. All of his new neighbors were talking about how the mountain lion had killed their pets or stolen their Amazon packages. So, to ingratiate himself with his new neighbors, Schaub decided he was going to kill the mountain lion. Brendan, who has never shot a gun, he's really adamant that you understand that point, went to a gun store in LA and got hustled into buying an AR-15 and Navy SEAL night vision goggles. I hope you have your laughing hats on, guys, because a wacky caper is about to ensue. Schaub then describes in hilarious detail his fantasy of waking up in the middle of the night, strapping on his paramilitary gear, punching the mountain lion in the nose, and then blowing it away with his AR-15. But wait a second, record scratch. Mountain lions are way bigger in real life than Brendan thought they were. He thought it was going to be like a bobcat, but actually it's a lion of the mountains, lol. So he panicked and closed the door, and the next morning he got on the Ring app and posted that, "Yo, we got a mountain lion problem, y'all." Comedy gold. There is a cringe hip-hop outro to match the cringe hip-hop intro and pad out the overall length of the video, but after stumbling over the 25-minute mark, this is basically it for the Gringo Papi. But that leaves me with the question, is it worse than the infamous You'd Be Surprised? That seems to be the general consensus on the internet. For perspective, You'd Be Surprised has a 1.7 star rating on IMDb, whereas the Gringo Papi earned an abyssal 1.1 stars. Still, I had to make sure I wasn't completely mistaken, so I went back and rewatched You'd Be Surprised to know how bad things really were. Gringo Papi is so bad it makes You'd Be Surprised look like a fucking George Carlin special. It is fundamentally worse in every way, except for the fact that it's shorter. But in every other regard, from the joke writing, the delivery, the pacing, the editing, and even the quality of the audio, this was a step down. The most glaring example is the background of the stage, that appears to be made of a blue sheet with some LED lights, and a silhouette of a city skyline cut out of cardboard. It's a far cry from the Showtime special, which took place in a huge theater, and on a stage that had his name in giant illuminated letters. It's so bad that I think it was breaking my brain as I was watching it, because periodically throughout the set I would notice the background again and be shocked at how bad it was as if I was looking at it with fresh eyes. If nothing else, this is the purest sign of how far Schaub's career has declined without Showtime. The editing is also shockingly bad. Aside from the awkward cuts that are sprinkled throughout the set, they repeatedly leave in Schaub bombing as well as audible boos. When there are laughs in this set, it's hard to tell if they're totally genuine or if the crowd reaction might have been sweetened up a little bit. Supposedly, Schaub recorded 5 different sets for this final product. I don't know if that's true, but you can see the people in the front row change frequently because they're clearly visible at all times due to the bright overhead lighting. Honestly, I don't know which possibility is worse. Was this the best they could scrape together from 5 different sets? Or did his editor just hang him out to dry? It makes you wonder, if this was the best they had to work with, what did the worst look like? Was it non-stop booing? Did Brendan freeze up like a deer in the headlights and forget his jokes? Did he just start crying and shitting his pants on stage? How bad could it be that what we got in this set was the best of 2.5 hours of material? The only redeeming quality that Gringo Papi has is that it's less than half as long as You'd Be Surprised. Yet, it still manages to have a tremendous amount of filler and boring, unfunny jokes that add nothing and only serve to pad out the length of the set. If he reworked Gringo Papi and cut the fat, it would have been about 10 minutes max. There is so much repetition and double or triple tagging mediocre punchlines that didn't even get a laugh the first time around. I think he references how much Mexicans love flaming hot Cheetos like 4 fucking times. And then there is the cringe-inducing crowd work and the name dropping. The 2 biggest crowd reactions Schaub gets during this set come when he name drops Theo Von and Joe Rogan for cheap applause. Somehow, Schaub has also gotten significantly worse at writing jokes and structuring a set. You can say a lot of negative things about You'd Be Surprised, but there was a kernel of understanding of pacing there. When compared to Gringo Papi, the jokes felt like jokes that were going somewhere, not aimless, unfunny ramblings. On top of that, he seems to have entirely forgotten how to deliver a punchline. So instead, he ends half of his jokes by saying, "Something in this voice, Papi!" Or he pulls a ridiculous face, or does some kind of embarrassing physical comedy that makes Amy Schumer's leather special look subdued by comparison. Overall, this set makes one thing clear. Schaub does not have a natural aptitude for stand-up comedy. He's been doing it for like 8 fucking years now, and hasn't shown any noticeable growth. If anything, his abilities seem to have regressed. This special was supposed to be in the making for 4 years. What did we get out of that? 6 minutes of COVID material, 13 minutes of tepid Mexican jokes, and then a boring story about a mountain lion with a wet fart of an ending. I'm not even trying to be mean to Schaub at this point. I just don't understand why somebody would so fiercely pursue something they clearly have no talent for. It's really mind-boggling. This set was built up for months, and it was supposed to be one of the tentpole events of Brendan's new thick boy media empire. This was Schaub betting on himself after he split with Showtime. There was that whole cringe-inducing compilation of Brendan's coattail riders congratulating him for releasing what amounts to a 25-minute-long YouTube video. As universally panned as You'd Be Surprised was, the Gringo Papi seems to be catching the attention of a much wider audience. Even other comedians are starting to make their feelings about Schwabo's comedy career known, which is also part of a bigger narrative that is forming around Brendan with tons of people taking notice of his many controversies and blunders. But that is a story for another day. The Gringo Papi isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was one of those moments that completely resets the scale that you use to determine how good or bad something really is. It's so bad that relative to it, other notoriously bad things seem okay in comparison. If you haven't watched it and you want something to cringe watch like a little kid watching a horror movie through your fingers, I would recommend it. Otherwise, probably avoid it. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. And a special thank you to my supporters on Patreon who help make these videos possible. Thank you. Iron Shamrock, Sentient Tomato Beefsteak, Ryan Williamson, Fightback CBD, Ryan Cedor, Mike Roballs, Julius Caesar Has Jungle Fever, Tracksuit, Get Door Get Det, Red at 78 Fiat, Jackson, Firebrand, Jack, Trey Bowles, Sneps, I Said No Cops, Paulo Gomez, Alex, Kyle, Hassan Jokai, Tambi Helmick, Neem, and Kevin Howard.